All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're getting into something pretty wild, something that has literally haunted humanity for thousands of years. We are looking at the historical reasons for divine judgment. I mean, if you've ever found yourself wondering exactly how ancient cultures justify these massive apocalyptic events, well, we're going to play the role of textual detectives today. We are going to unpack the exact documented causes of divine retribution according to this ancient source text.
Okay, let's dive into this because the text really doesn't mess around. It hits us immediately with the absolute ultimate endgame. I will bring down a deluge upon the earth and will destroy all men. Wow. I mean, that is a seriously heavy absolute statement. It establishes these terrifying apocalyptic stakes right out of the gate. We're not talking about a bad storm or a rough farming season here. This is total, world-ending destruction. But why? What could possibly trigger a sentence this final in the minds of the ancients? Well, let's figure out how the text actually gets us there.
So think of this whole narrative as a giant cosmic courtroom drama. The formal indictment here is crystal clear. God convicts the idolaters and sodomitic fornicators. The author wastes absolutely zero time telling us exactly who is on trial here. This is essentially the opening statement of the prosecution, laying out the exact charges against humanity before we even start looking at the underlying evidence.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because you have to ask, how did humanity even get to that point? Well, the text explicitly states that humanity rejected the divine commandments and the yoke. Now think about that word for a second. In the ancient world, a yoke was a very real, everyday agricultural tool. It represented submission, right? Being aligned to a master's direction. So the text isn't painting this as just some passive mistake or accidental ignorance. No, this is a deliberate, active rejection. They didn't just forget the rules, they literally threw off the harness entirely. And it's this profound act of spiritual defiance that serves as the foundational root cause for all the chaos that comes next.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark, powerful metaphor the text uses next. It says, worthless seed has come up, not fearing God. Keep in mind, in these ancient agrarian societies, bad seed wasn't just a minor inconvenience, it was a disaster. It meant a failed harvest, terrible famine, and honestly total societal collapse. So by calling the current generation worthless seed, the text is basically arguing that the very nature of humanity has been spoiled from the ground up. They've grown up completely 100% devoid of divine reverence.
And you can totally see the cause and effect when you look at how this breaks down. On one side, we've got the spiritual sins. The source tells us they begun to bow down to vain gods and denied my unity. It's essentially theological treason. But notice how this immediately connects to the earthly corruptions on the other side. They've laden the whole earth with untruths and abominable lecheries. Historically, these texts made a really compelling argument. The absolute second you reject the divine, earthly chaos is guaranteed to follow. The spiritual failing just bleeds directly into the physical world.
And once that spiritual dam breaks, the physical corruption just floods the earth. The text goes through this crazy litany of charges. They laden the whole earth with untruths, with offenses, abominable lecheries, namely one with another, and all manner of other unclean wickednesses. The words just pile up, boom, 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 one after the other. It's this rapid-fire list that's designed to overwhelm you, perfectly mirroring how this uncontrollable cascading wave of sin has just completely overrun the planet.
But then, it just stops. The text does something rhetorically brilliant here. It cuts the list off entirely, just saying these things are disgusting to relate. Think about how powerful that is. The author builds up all this massive momentum of earthly sins and then abruptly refuses to give us the final, darkest details. It's the ancient equivalent of saying, guys, it's so bad I literally can't even say it out loud. By summarizing how unspeakable it is instead of just listing more things, it forces our imagination to fill in the blanks, and that makes the corruption seem infinitely worse.
And that brings us to the actual sentencing. And therefore I will bring down a deluge upon the earth. I want you to pay really close attention to that word, therefore. It is the absolute linchpin of the whole argument. It shows us exactly how this historical worldview rationalized a massive natural disaster strictly through the lens of human morality. This flood, it's not random weather. Because humanity committed these crimes, therefore, the flood must come. It's a calculated judicial act of cause and effect.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how uncompromising the promised destruction actually is. Under the judged, the text lists all men and the whole earth. There are absolutely no exceptions. And their fate? To be destroyed and to crumble together. I mean, this isn't a localized warning meant to teach a quick lesson. It is a complete and total factory reset of the known world.
Which brings us to the very end of the passage. The whole earth will crumble into great darkness. It's such a terrifying, visceral phrase, right? Especially when you remember this was an ancient world without artificial light. Just a moment ago, the text was full of all this noisy clamor of earthly rebellion spreading across the globe, and now it's a dramatic shift to a silent, absolute void, a complete wiping away of not just light, but light itself.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to consider as we wrap up. Based on the historical reasoning we just mapped out, when the earth crumbles to darkness, is it merely a just punishment for humanity's crimes, or is it the actual undoing of creation itself? We've traced the logic from spiritual rebellion, straight to earthly corruption, all the way to absolute cosmic judgment. It's a truly fascinating look at how ancient texts understood divine justice and just how incredibly fragile they believed our world to be. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this deep dive into the anatomy of judgment leaves you with something powerful to chew on.